And speaking of Lori, I'm just very excited to have Lori here representing the Behavioral Health Network. If you saw the email I sent on Monday, you'll know that she comes to Ely by way of Ohio, rural Ohio, before being, I think, located in Cleveland and Columbus. And her background, although she's very, her interesting background makes her very well equipped to manage all of the different things she manages for the Behavioral Health Network. So I believe there was time in radio advertising for a rock station, as well as working for the MLS soccer team in Columbus, the Columbus Crew. So I am very fascinated to hear more of what Lori has to say. She will be focusing, I think, on the Behavioral Health Network today, but I think any question is a fair question when it comes time for questions. So Lori, come on up.
I can't see Zoom, so hello to everyone on Zoom. So I'm Lori Linkous with the Behavioral Health Network. I'm the Community Education Coordinator, and today specifically, I'm here to talk to you about the behavioral health literacy curriculum that we're currently facilitating in the Ely Public Schools in conjunction with ECR, Ely Community Resource, and the school advisor, John Townsend. So there's 4 facilitators that are doing that. We're in a partnership to do it. And we're supporting the school with this curriculum to get it done, to get all students grades 6 through 12 behavioral health literacy, to help them through a pandemic, to help them through teenage life, to help them understand that mental health is health. So.
Perfect.
Okay. So, who am I? What is the BHN? So, who am I? I did send out a bio, and Lacey did a great job of introducing me, but I do come from Ohio. I am from a very rural area in Southeast Ohio that is very similar to Appalachia. Mm-hmm. So, which is much different than Columbus and Cleveland, which is where I ended up. I did spend a lot of my professional career in advertising and partnerships with professional sports. However, once I made it to Northeast Ohio, I worked in community mental health recovery, and there was a huge transition in my life that really led me down that path and made me go towards that passion. So that's where I spent a majority of my time before I landed here in Ely, Minnesota. And just so happened to have this outstanding conversation with the folks at the Behavioral Health Network, even before I moved here. Had my first conference call while I was driving a movie truck to Ely. We actually had our property here for it was about 1.5 years before we moved here permanently. And did so after we got our 2 college freshmen kind of settled into college, and then we bolted. We jumped ship. So, and the Behavioral Health Network, just so you know, is just a group of organizations that work together to help the community focus on mental health and resources. So it was a kind of a dream child of the community care team, which a lot of you might be familiar with as well. And we are under the organizational umbrella of Wellbeing Development, who is our fiscal agent. And we are housed currently in the basement of the bowling alley. So that is where our home is. So this is a lot to read. It's a lot to read. But, and I guess I could share out if you do a summary for the meeting. I didn't realize that we would be Zooming. So I can share this out too, because it is something that will go out to the community and does go out to parents. But the focus on mental health literacy and why we're doing it is what Lacey provided to you guys, or has for you guys. I'm sorry. But it might be more information than what you want, but it is for the community to understand. There's been lots of questions as to why we would do behavioral health literacy within the school. What does it interrupt? What are we taking away from the students when we do it? A lot of people are like, well, are you interrupting their math? Like, don't they need their math? And I can assure you that I'm not going in to facilitate behavioral health literacy during algebra or calculus here in Ely. So the students are getting their math for sure. But this kind of just gives you the definition of what the behavioral health literacy is. And it's defined as the knowledge and understanding that helps us become responsible, effective, and successful in living full and healthy lives. With good mental health literacy, we learn how to take better care of ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities. Teaching this foundation is critical, especially in adolescence, as the diagnosis of mental illnesses begin to increase dramatically during this time of development. Just as we teach other types of literacy, English, math, overall health, it is critical that we teach mental health literacy. I don't like reading things off of pages, but I just think that that's really important to understand. Mental health is health. We do all kinds of extracurricular classes in school. These students are in the middle of a pandemic. They're experiencing something that even us as adults, we have never experienced, that is traumatic to us in a way that we are trying to navigate through. They are navigating through things with technology that we have never experienced. And here in our community, they are experiencing things in their families, in this community, and in their lives that they need to know how to get resources for, that they need to know how to grow from, and that they need to know how to understand. Not when they're 30, but to maybe understand as they grow and as they go through it. That is why, just like anything else. So you need math before you need algebra. You need algebra before you need calculus. You need these things before you need college. And you need certain things in college before you go into the rest of your life. So, any questions about that? Why the school? And I can help you understand why we're involved too. So with the pandemic, the students at the school were going through something. Last year in the school, within our network of people just kind of came to us and said, we really need something. Now is the time to do something. And so we found something that was very prescriptive, and it was called Trails to Wellness. And we implemented it in grades 6 through 12 right away. And just talking about CBT skills and coping skills and active ways to get through this very traumatic time of COVID-19 and all the changes that were going on. And with that, it kind of opened up the door with, this is something that our students need. This is something we need to continue. This is something that's important. This is something that's effective. That specific program was not available as a curriculum outside of Michigan. That was just something they were offering for COVID-19. So Rihanna Hegman, which most of you might be very familiar with, had done, and she's our program director. She had researched and worked with the mental health coalition that we then came across this curriculum. We worked with them at length, introduced it to the school, and said, as organizations in the community, we will support facilitating this since your teachers and staff are at capacity. The teachers and staff are also going through it. So they didn't have the ability to take on a new curriculum, add it into what they were already doing with the unforeseen future of what COVID was going to bring. So as organizations, we partnered up and we're doing grades 6 through 12, and we're currently on grades 8 and 9. So is there anything about the backstory of the curriculum that anybody has questions about?
You said that it's a collaboration between Behavioral Health Network, Ely Community Resource, John Townsend, and who is he?
He is the counselor, so he's the advisor at the school.
Cool. And there was a fourth entity? Or is that those three? Okay, perfect.
There's 4 facilities.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
So I thought that the best way to explain, if you guys don't have any questions, the best way to explain kind of what we're doing and how it looks, the sheet that you have really does explain each module as we go through it, at least a summary of what the students in the community are learning about behavioral health and mental health, and how we try to capture that. And, you know, the dialogue takes us, we only have 50 minutes. So sometimes it becomes so interactive that we don't get to go through a complete session, but it's important for it to go wherever it needs to go, for the questions to be whatever they are, and for the natural conversation to be whatever it needs to be. And what, I'm a stranger to the students, so, you know, it's kind of nice right in the beginning because they don't know right away how to, they're not super comfortable acting out or misbehaving. So I do have their attention for a while. They are very engaged. And this is something that's of interest to them, whether they want to openly acknowledge it or not at first. You know, there's a lot of families going through a lot of things in our community. These kids are part of those families. Mm-hmm. Some of those students look like they're my age. You know, their faces, mm-hmm. You know, their lives are on their faces, and they need this information. So whether they're engaged in class or interacting in class, they are receiving the resources and receiving the information. But I thought it would be good for you guys to kind of see an example of what we do.
Yeah.
And fun. And everybody can see this is shared on Zoom.
Yep. This is the primary screen on Zoom. So this is what people are seeing.
So, Lori, could you put this in context? So do you meet with them throughout a semester or just one breakout session?
So
maybe you're coming to that.
No. Yeah. It's good because it's so much. It's hard. I couldn't figure out how to really just kind of put it all together. It's 6 weeks with each grade. So through the 4, we team up. So Mr. Townsend and I are teamed together, and we do a grade for 6 weeks, 1 time a week. So we take one class, and it's split. So like 9th grade, we do 2 classes per week. It's 2 separate classes. Mm-hmm. So we can cover the entire 9th grade. And we do it for 6 weeks. And Jill and Ryan take care of 8th grade right now, and they do it the same way. And then when our 6 weeks, 7-ish weeks, depending on how long it takes us, we'll move on to 10th and 11th grade and then 12th. And that is what we did before Christmas. We did it with 6th and 7th grade. So we used 7 weeks to make sure that we had enough time, but it's 6 modules, 6 sessions that we use. And that 7th one we kind of are using for any questions, resources, discussion, just to be able to recap the content, make sure there's nothing that we didn't cover.
There was a question via Zoom.
Okay.
Someone asked if can or do parents opt out of the curriculum?
We have had.
Okay. Oh, the question was, are there parents who have opted their kids out of the curriculum?
We have had a student who was going something, and the parent had decided that they preferred that the student not participate in the class, and that is the only one that I'm aware of. We do get feedback, mm-hmm. and we do correspond with that, and I think Mr. Townsend has done so wonderfully by providing information to those families and any misinformation that is taken home or any misunderstandings that are occurring with discussions. But the discussions are real. The information is accurate, mm-hmm. and the discussions are real. And we do have content about mental illness and mental disorder, and about them being clinical disorders. And I think we've learned to be very clear about certain information so that there are not misunderstandings. And we do learn as we go, mm-hmm. With the students as well, as you do with teaching, I think, with anything. Mm-hmm. But these conversations, you know, we tell them that they don't even have to participate, mm-hmm. and certainly do not have to share information about themselves when we ask questions. I think we've learned to emphasize that a little bit more, especially as we get involved with the older students.
Yep, so far.
Okay, so this would be, they come into the class, but I love working in the class that we work with now. I have the same teacher. He's very interactive. He always has like a question of the day for the students. They all Google some geographical information. It's fun. I participate. And then this is their first slide. It just kind of gives a topic that we're going to cover, and then we move on to the next slide. And we do something as CBT, so a cognitive behavioral therapy skill. So something, a coping skill. It's usually box breathing. They're not very tolerant of a whole lot of things. But box breathing is very important to teach the students because they could have exams, they can have speeches. I always tell them, just so you all know, I do not like speaking. I tell them I'm not a teacher. I am a community education coordinator, so this is probably odd. I'm not a huge fan of speaking in front of groups of people. So I tell them box breathing assists me in this. And it's envisioning a box. And at the top of the box, you're breathing in through your nose for 4. You're holding it for 4. You're letting it out your mouth for 4. Then you're relaxing for 4. And then you're starting it over. And you really are taking your time as you're doing it. You can close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open. Nobody has to know that you're doing it. Nobody usually knows I'm doing it. Well, they might think I'm holding my breath. I don't know. My face probably gets red. And as we build upon that, some of the kids do it. They try to make it look like they're not doing it. They are. But we make it applicable. Like you can tell who has a game that night because they're wearing a tie, as their freshmen. Who doesn't get nervous before they play, especially when you're a freshman. So we talk about that kind of stuff. Asked who has a test, asked who has a paper, asked who has to give a speech, and we just talk about the different box breathing. We build upon that as the sessions go and give them more skills they get the box breathing down to where they're not thinking about it, and then they build upon that. In this one, I can do it or we could not do it, but so a way that we have chosen to build upon it is to play a song. While they box breathe, there's this song that's very repetitive with a word, and we added mindfulness to it. So while they're box breathing, it's a very impactful song. It's a very calming song. It's a current song, but it's adding layers into that, having them listen to the song, having them be mindful to listen for their certain word and mark down every time they hear that word, and keeping them breathing throughout the entire time. And it's amazing, even as an adult doing it. It's amazing how it takes them someplace else, and you kind of have to bring them back in to the class. And then they're very engaged because they, for one, want to win something for getting the right amount of words. But it's just a good way to start the class. It's a good way to get everybody calm and engaged, and that's how we start that. And then we recap. So what did we do last week? Stigma. We are certainly addressing stigma. We're addressing stigma in the community, or trying to address stigma in the community. And this is how we're defining stigma to the students in our school as an unfair and negative attitude or belief towards a person or a group that causes prejudice and leads to negative actions and discrimination. And then we give examples, and we let them give examples. And then we talk about, when we discuss stigma, we talked about, what do you think of when you think of mental illness? Yes, words. Words, just the first words, there's no right or wrong. Just tell us. We got a lot of words. Some were sadness, some were this person needs help, scared, alone. There was a lot of negative words. Some of them were just totally negative, but then we asked them, what are the first words that come to your mind when you hear the word cancer? And then the empathetic words that came through, and how can you help, and things like that. And then we address the fact that the difference between these two clinical diagnoses are stigma. And that's how we start the session. And then we talk about myths, facts. And then that is how we move through mental health and behavioral health curriculum. We talk about that mental health is health. It should be treated the same as physical health, and understanding the differences between a clinical diagnosis and a mental health problem and things that need addressed and resources local to us in our community. So then we kind of give them homework if they want to participate or not, but who's talking about mental health right now? Where do they see it? These kids live in social media, and that's where these conversations are happening. So who is talking about it? They introduced me to, I learned about 4 new artists, musicians last week that I had never heard of before. You know, some that I don't have the ability to play in the classes, but it's real and it's discussing these topics and these kids are listening to it. They hear it, so they're aware of it. And then, you know, to go way back and talk about Albert Einstein and how, you know, he suffered mental illness, and for them to know that this is just important information. So we talk about it. This was our topic today. So understanding the difference between a mental disorder, which is a clinical disorder, a mental health problem, death of a family member, death of a pet, a divorce in a family, a move when you don't want to have to move, just something that is traumatic and valid to you that can have long-standing impact that you can need help with. That could be ongoing, but it's not a mental illness. Mental distress, which is, I use the example of coming to talk to you guys today. For me, talking to a group, they said, well, what about us? And I said, I was box breathing before I came to talk to you guys too. So, but this is different. I have to go and explain something, and that's mental distress to me. But it's fine. I have coping skills. That's what, you know, we do. And they were able to we did these exercises. Oh, and the next one being no distress, problem or disorder, which is just, you know, you're going to get your coffee and it's great. And then we did an exercise. So the next one, sorry.
No problem.
We just did an exercise where we have these Postits along the wall, and we talk about those 4 categories of the pyramid, and this pyramid is important to the rest of the sessions. And we give them one color to say, do you have any examples in your life to fit each of those categories? And they get like 5 to 7 minutes to go around the room. It doesn't have to pertain to them specifically. If they have a great example, they should put it up there. I love it when kids get funny. And they put funny stuff up because I'm never serious. So I enjoy that. But some of them put very real things up there, as anonymous as they could. And you can see they try to be very discreet about when they're going to the board. And I'm sure this will keep happening as we work with older kids, because they do start pointing, they try to guess who did what or said what. But there were some very real things up there. There's a lot of divorces apparently happening in that freshman class. You know, a lot of grandparents have recently died. A couple parents have passed. And there's some moving that is happening. There's some friends that aren't getting along. And there are some children in that class that have been clinically diagnosed with a disorder. So, and then some of them really find the no distress, the everything's okay times when they're able to game or be on their phone, when they're able to be in a completely different realm mentally. I was going to get my coffee. There's playing on the phone. So we discussed how you can actually be all 4 in the same day. You can have a clinical diagnosis. You can have had somebody die in your family, have a mental health problem. You can have to give a speech in your class and have some mental distress. And for a second, it could be lunch and you could be chatting with your friends and be okay for a second. You can have all 4 of the pyramid in the same day, and you can have none. You know, it can change, but understanding those different layers of where you are mentally are very important to knowing yourself and getting through things. And then we use the same kind of exercise to discuss feelings. What kind of feelings do you attach with each thing? Those were funny. I enjoyed some of those as well. And some of them were very serious. And they give real answers. And I learn from them as they do this too. So, I have 3 daughters. 2 are now sophomores in college, and 1 is 26-year-old social worker in Columbus, Ohio. She works with Children's Services. None of us obviously would like to be wealthy ever, but we do want to help people. So, they've gone through it. They could have used some of this information.
Mhm.
I could have used some of this knowledge when my daughters were starting in high school.
Mhm.
They would have missed a lot less school. They certainly would have gotten through some of our harder times, or at least they would have had some choices and some resources and understanding on certain things for themselves. So, and then we this was a shorter class that we did. If we go on to the next one. We want to make sure as we recap what the classes, we always talk about what did you know? What do you want to know? What resources do you need? What about this topic do you want to know about? Is there something you want to learn about? Is there something going on in your life that you feel like you need to know more about, or the resources for, or who you need to talk to? What have you learned just from us being here, and what has changed? So if you thought you knew something about ADHD, if you thought you knew something about PTSD, if you thought you knew some schizophrenia, if you thought you knew something about major depressive disorder, what did you learn, and what has changed? And was there a stigma attached to it? Does that help you understand the difference of knowledge? Does that help you understand the difference of how you approach other people and how you work, through things in your own life? And then, we'll get more into that. We'll kind of list those things out when it allows for time for discussion. We never have time for an end discussion, really. It gets so engaging throughout.
Mhm.
They have a lot of questions once we get into the mental illness portion, because it's a lot of information about mental illness. It's information they need to know and understand. It's destigmatizing mental illness. It's education on mental illness. And then we get into a lot of information about resources, community resources, and then resources that they can tap into on their own without the assistance of an adult. So resources that they can utilize with technology that will assist them, but maybe they're not going to gain access otherwise to any resources. So, and it's a big thank you for your time.
Mhm.
I always ask them to be kind, and I always open it up for questions. I almost lost an eyeball today. Some of my Postits were being used as paper airplanes. I did tell the gentleman that my eyeballs thanked him for keeping them on his desk. They're good kids. They have a lot of questions. They're uncomfortable with the information, but they stay engaged. So, it's definitely, I have learned a ton. I have gained a ton from being a part of this process.
How many students in a class, in a session?
So it ranges. We will end up probably facilitating to a total of 310 students. And it's usually about 20 kids per class, 18 to 20 kids per class. This freshman class is heavy the first session. The second session not as heavy. It just really depends on the class that you're going to. So it's harder. There's a lot more students.
Or do you think this will effectively derail the stigma these kids have? And if so, you see a difference in between the 6th and 12th graders for acceptance?
Yeah, I see the immaturity. I see, I think there's going to be some things that you can't take out of certain grades and their emotional maturity level. I saw some things with 6th and 7th graders. I saw students that absolutely needed the information and resources. and I saw them, attached to it. I saw some kids that were making fun of the information initially, start to not engage, but then stop making fun of the information, slowly engage in sixth and seventh grade, and then at least stop giving us a hard time and stop giving other people a hard time. That's the changes I saw. And yeah, it almost calls out the monster. It almost puts it in the light that you should be embarrassed to stigmatize this subject matter. You're bringing this to the forefront. This is what it is. This is a health issue, and it's meant to be understood. And it's bullying one way or another. But it's more so people can understand. These students can understand themselves and things that they're going through, whether it's a mental illness or a mental disorder, or different stages of their lives and things that they're experiencing, so they can understand. They go through things at such extremes, and to be able to understand and put them into categories and kind of get a handle on it, understand what they do have control over, and make tools that they have through this, even if other things in their life they don't have any control. Yeah, I think that answers your question. I do think it does. It as it should, as you're destigmatizing anything. Who is, after you bring that to light and after you educate people, who would want to stigmatize then something after that? After you have the knowledge of what something is, it almost would be purposeful and mean, to then shame someone or embarrass someone or to categorize somebody like that.
Does gender identity come up in discussions? Because it seems to be much more out there than, way back when I was in school. I'm struggling with that now.
Yeah, so one of the resources that I provide, the teenmentalhealth.org, the Mental Health America, and the Trevor Project. So we don't address, as we're going through LGBTQ plus specifically. It's never a category or a part of a session that we address. It's always inclusive too. So we make sure that we always include it in the conversation as we would include divorce or anything else. It's a part of someone's life. It's a part of something that someone might be going through. And there is a resource for that. It's a tremendous resource for that. It's actually a tremendous resource for youth mental health in general, but it is such a specific and tremendous resource. So the Trevor Project, we always send people to, and always make sure there's resources for it. It hasn't come up in discussion. So no one has raised a hand. Some of the videos that we play very much openly discuss that. So it's inclusive too, so that everybody understands that this is a very inclusive conversation. Even here in Ely, we want to make sure it's known that. So this is a part of the conversation. This is life. Every person needs to be represented in that conversation. But no one has brought it up specifically. There is a need at the school. It has been addressed at the school, separate from this. So we also make sure that we, any resources we can provide to support that we do.
And sorry.
I would guess suicide is also another topic that would be really important to discuss.
Yeah, suicide prevention, not only with the school, but with the college is well, and just in general, extremely important. And so tomorrow, I facilitate along with the other things that I do with the facilitation in schools, EPAR, the Ely Conviction Awareness and Recovery Coalition. Thrive Range and the Wilder Research team is working with the grant that St. Louis County received for suicide prevention. And they did a big kind of think tank, and they did some research in our area to see what we needed in our area, and they're giving us those results tomorrow. So while it's a part of the conversation with the behavioral health curriculum, it's only a part of the conversation because it's inclusive to it. That will be a larger part of the community stigma campaign, anti-stigma campaign, the mental health awareness month lead up project. But suicide prevention is a huge project that will be coming this way. And it's a huge statewide and county-wide project as well.
On Zoom, someone had just asked about resources. So what resources do you tell the kids about? Do you give them websites? Do you give them brochures? Do you have people come into class and introduce themselves? Just kind of more about what resources are provided and what channels they're provided through.
Sure. So we do have a resource list that we have provided. And the first point of contact we always ask is, you know, if a student needs something, we ask them to go to Mr. Townsend, and they can do so unless they're going to harm themselves or somebody else, or someone is harming them. They can have that conversation back and forth with them, and we can advise them, you know, on some resources. He has a list of community resources that through our behavioral health network, you know, we're connected to all of our local organizations, so range mental health, you know, essential health. You know, we have the resources. We have several different clinicians and therapists that we also are aware of. But we kind of keep it simple on that resource list as a referral out to them. So there is the crisis text, the crisis response, mobile response through range mental health. And then, you know, there's those subcategories of the things that I listed, which is, you know, things that students can text for, check out the websites for that are meant to be those resources or anonymous resources as well. But we do ask that they start with Mr. Townsend if they do need a resource. And he does have a list of updated and secure community resources. We do supply the families. When we initially started this, that same resource list, we did a parent letter. There was an email sent out, and we made sure that the families also had that list. Oh, we also did a parent training before this. We invited the community and parents to go through a free kind of, this is what the curriculum is going to be. This is what we're going to be going through with the students. We want you to ask questions. We want you to know, you know, what is going to be happening. And the organization that we partnered with to do their curriculum had their representatives there as well, so that we could have a whole community conversation about it. We did it via Zoom.
Is the focus on the mental health, or do you give them strategies for doing a family related issue with brother, sister, parent, and a dependent?
A lot of the topics, so when we do like exercises, a lot of them give examples of parent, specifically a sibling. There was one of the topics that was like, if your sibling is doing X, Y, and Z, you know, is this something that you're experiencing in your life? How would you respond? Who is it that you would go to talk to? And this is kind of later throughout the curriculum, so that they understand, you know, we're kind of building up to that. Understanding the resources that you can go through. This is happening to you, but you're not experiencing it yourself. This is what you can do. And we do discuss that, like, what if someone gets mad at me? What if I lose a relationship? What if, you know, that fear of losing loyalty, that fear of those kinds of things. So we have those conversations as we go on. And we do build up to that, though, because we really are trying to get to know self, understand the information, and then understand circumstances.
Let me see.
So I would like to know, going forward, you're hitting 6 through 12. Clearly, what you're teaching at 6th grade may need a refresher at 12, or those new kids coming in. So what is the, do you have an expectation, a plan going forward down the years for this wonderful
I think the idea with the school, and it is the schools, at this point program, so if they wanted, teachers that were, if their classes were impacted by it, and they were like, I love this, I can put this into I would love to do this myself, they could. But incoming sixth graders are supposed to get it every year, and then I believe it was at the 10th grade level that they would get a refresher. So at the 6 week, same sessions. And because we're facilitators, and we did make some changes with the information, and modified it to fit, these facilitators that created this information had 2 hours to work with these kids, and just basically all the time in the world, which so we have several grades, short amount of time, 50 minutes, and we really have made it work, for our students specifically. But yeah, they are supposed to come back, every sixth grader coming in, and then a refresher for 10th grade. And there is something that the seniors can do as well, because there's a lot of information that seniors, if they are choosing to go on to higher education, should know about how they have to advocate for themselves once they're in college. And, what the college does not take care of for them, what they have to actually initiate, take care of for themselves, should they have a need for special support due to mental health. And that is for the student to navigate. And a lot of parents and a lot of students don't understand that until they're in the middle of something very messy, that is very costly, and has exhausted a lot of time. So for the seniors to experience something with that knowledge base would be outstanding. Yeah.
We did have someone on Zoom say that you look so relaxed and provide such a great presentation, that it must be so wonderful for the students to experience you, admitting that you do experience some mental distress around speaking, and then to conversely do such a wonderful job. So that was one of the audience members' comments.
Your check is in the mail.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I do like the conversation.
Yeah.
And it did warm me up that I did just facilitate a class.
Yeah.
I was in sales for a long period of time, and I had was in some higher level account sales, and I had to give. These were some of my national, account presentations for some media stuff and partnership stuff, and I absolutely did fine. And then one day I did not, and from that day, I lost the ability to speak. I lost my knees. And from that day forward, I was no longer a public speaker, and it has taken quite some time to regain that. But I don't know what happened. I could never explain to anybody, what occurs. But someone decided to take that away. Maybe he gave it to somebody else who needed it. But I really had to work at it for a while.
Doing great.
Thanks. It's now time to sing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, I think that's everything from our Zoom crowd. Does anyone in person have any other final questions or thoughts?
What does suicide prevention enter into? What's that? What is being done about that?
So the suicide prevention with the curriculum, we talk about, so some of the content that we watch, and we talk about suicide. So we talk about suicidality, we talk about suicide ideation as a mental disorder. And within mental illness, we watch content that talks about it. We talk about grief and loss. The suicide prevention that is likely to occur within the community is upcoming. So that's going to be prevention within the school and a lot of conversation in the community. So within a campaign that will happen outside of the curriculum, but also that will be happening inside the school, just not with this curriculum. There's not a ton of suicide prevention specific in this curriculum. It's a part of the conversation. But that is a topic that is extremely important. So, and I believe that, I'm pretty open as a person discussing my experiences. I don't think everybody's comfortable with that with students, but I you have to talk about these things and your experiences to destigmatize them. And there probably isn't any of these topics that I have not experienced personally in my life. So I'm very passionate about it, very open about it. I feel that we have to be in order to destigmatize it. I realize that not everybody is super comfortable with talking about their families, you know, biggest traumas and issues, and it's just not, or it's not a culture to it. But if we are going to save the lives of some people who need it, they need to understand that they are not alone, and that there's hope, and that there are people standing up that have survived some pretty awful things, talking about it. So it's very important.
Does substance abuse come up?
Substance abuse comes up. That again is more of a conversation that UPark is supposed to be having in the school as a prevention coalition. It comes up as an ongoing outside, I don't want to say it. It comes up throughout each session. It never is the topic of every session. It comes up in recovery. It comes up as, you know, like how people misuse substances because they are suffering other traumas or experiences, and how that can lead to addiction, provided, you know, the type of person or the, you know, the health of that person, or the person's life. They could be experiencing that in their life. We do provide those resources as well, but it's never like one of the topics. But UPark, you know, prevention in the school should be discussing meth use in the community, prescription opioid use, non-prescription opioid use in the community, heroin use in the community. And when I say in the community, I mean in our community, and the alcohol misuse in the community, and how it's impacting families, people, and the children of the community. And recovery support, and how to support our community and destigmatize that as well. But we do have organizations that, you know, are working towards that. So it just needs, you know, some more active people, you know, in those efforts. Imagine once students start to feel secure and understand certain things about how they're feeling and what healthy relationships are and healthy communication is and healthy lifestyle is, how that's going to make certain conversations uncomfortable, which we expect to be communicated with then. Once things start to get uncomfortable in a household, that's when we're going to start to get communications from people, because we're changing their dynamic and they're not going to like that. Imagine how juvenile the adults in some people's lives are going to seem once people understand what healthy communication is, what healthy views on yourselves are, what healthy resources might look like, and what, no matter what side you're on, what respect is, what empathy is, what, you know, taking care of each other as a community looks like. And yeah, hopefully that bubbles up. But what we would like to do is, you know, I'm working also on a project, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we need the planning committee. We have a small group of people who are working on that planning committee, which starts at the beginning of the year. That is helping the community. That's community health. That's community education. That's destigmatizing. That's suicide prevention. It's recovery assistance. It's everything leading up to Mental Health Awareness Month.
Which is in May.
Which is in May. But that planning committee and inclusiveness and making sure that everybody is represented well, you know, we need people from all parts of the community for that. So I would be the contact for that, but I am certainly looking for people for that committee.
Does the Ely school system, or does your wider organization have a kind of a emergency response team ready to go just in case?
It is my understanding before I do believe the school has their emergency response to that in place.
Oh.
But I do know that there is such a support for the schools with the area organizations that obviously occurred before I existed here. That is in place, and I believe that they continue to seek and update and especially now with the new information, with the research and what that will be doing, we'll probably even update that further. But I do understand that they do have a response in place. And no, if anybody is wondering, talking about suicide does not cause people to commit suicide. There couldn't be more of a myth. Talking about something does not cause people to do it, does not give them the idea to do it, does not push them towards that. Not talking about it is going to be more impactful in people's lives. So there should never be confusion about that. It is when you're being educated on how to help other people, that is one of the first thing educators tell you, is that you are not going to cause a suicide by talking about suicide.
Lots of important information learned and gathered here today. Thank you, Lori.